Welcome back. New day in the shop. We are in the home stretch here. This place is a giant mess. I've got parts everywhere. I've got oil everywhere. I've got whatever was on this bike everywhere. It's always fun taking these things apart because every time you do it, you get the same results. A giant mess. There's typically oil and grime and what the heck ever that just falls all over the place. So I'll have a day's worth of cleaning ahead of me once I get this thing torn down. But we are in the absolute home stretch here. The motor comes out today, the front end comes apart today, and once those things are done, that's it. It's done. Now I do have the bike supported on a jack in the rear, and then I've got some boards underneath the engine itself, and I've got the engine kind of sitting on that. I know it's not the best way to do it. I know I should have a second jack here and something actually supporting the motor a little bit better, but this is what I have, and this is the best way I could do it. I could reverse the jack and the 2x4s, but I feel that if I did that, the bike could tip. I feel like this is the most stable way. I'm not really sure. I'm not an expert at this. I've yanked a lot of motors and I've done it a different way every time. This is my probably second or third, rubber mounted motor that I've taken out of a bike, so it's a little different. Anyway, we're going to get after it. We're going to go ahead and undo all the wiring to make sure all the wires are free from this so everything's ready to come out of this bike. And I know I've got a lot of zip ties to remove, and I know I've got some wiring still hooked up to the motor, and I've got the throttle cable and all those parts that are still intact, and I want to get those things off. So we're going to start by taking the throttle cable off and just kind of work my way down through the wiring to see what I have. It's always fun with your tools everywhere to kind of look across the madness and see, where everything's at. I know I haven't put these things in the best spots, and I probably should honestly pick them up and put them wherever. We're going to let the throttle tube hang for a little bit here. I'm going to go ahead and start cutting zip ties across the backbone here, cutting zip ties down the bottom, and then undo the wiring from the engine. Some of these are so brittle, they're just falling apart. But with that one out of the way, now I can move the throttle cable and let that sit on top of the motor for now. Now I'm going to look across the motor here and I'm going to see what wiring is still hooked up to it that needs to be removed. I want to make sure that this thing is ready to yank when I unbolt everything. I don't want to have a wire hanging me up and causing some sort of catastrophic damage. It's always a bad idea to pull on wires. I think I've got all the zip ties removed from this bike. All the wiring is unhooked. I think this engine is to the point where I can actually unbolt it and then pull it from the frame. I think I'm going to rename this bike Project Zip Tie, honestly. I've never cut so many ties on a motorcycle ever. I know that somebody's worked on this bike, or I assume somebody's worked on this bike based on that. I know some of these things are factory. Some of these, there's no way they could be. I don't know. I know a lot of changes happened in the early 80s, and maybe that's what they were doing then. I'm not completely sure. So we'll start with the lower motor mounts first. I'm going to take the mounts right off of the engine itself, and I'm going to leave the rubber mount on the frame for now. Once I get those off, then I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the top motor mount, so that's ready to remove. So we'll start with the bottom first, and then we'll work our way up. Motor mounts are commonly a 9/16, so I've got my ratchet on the top, and I've got my wrench to go on the bottom. Hopefully I've got just enough room to snake it in there. With the bottom motor mounts free, completely removed, the motor is swinging in the chassis a little bit. It's resting on the boards, kind of. So now I want to go ahead and I want to remove this top motor mount bolt. And then from there, I should be able to pull the motor out gently. Now with the top motor mount out of the way, I should be able to gently move the motor a little bit to be able to get this bolt out of place, and then the motor will be completely free from the chassis. Now with the motor completely free, I'll be able to tip it out of this side of the frame and gently guide it into the stand. So I have to grab my stand real quick and move everything into place so I can get this thing set down properly. They never get easier to remove, that's for sure. It feels like every time they get heavier. That brake line I left there, unfortunately, it was right in the way and it hung up right on the engine. Of course, I had to yank on it a little bit to get it out. And, you run the risk of losing your footing, especially on a greasy shop floor. Not a good recipe, that's for sure. Definitely a recipe for disaster that I'm thankful I didn't run into. But the motor is removed. It's completely free from the chassis here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the front two motor mounts. I'm going to go ahead and put that top motor mount back in place. That way those things can stay with this engine in case the next owner wants them. With the motor out of the bike, it's ready for a bath. I know this thing needs a little bit of a cleaning. I want to make it look a little bit nicer. I don't want it to look like it's an old motor. It does run really well, and maybe I'll leave it that way, and that way the new owner can see kind of what it looks like and not think they're getting duped because it's, a clean motor. But like I said, it did run really well. So, my thought process is I can clean it up and make it look nice, because if you're going to put it in your bike, you'd want it to look nice anyway. I don't know. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I like how they look when they're clean. Most people, I think, do. Maybe I'm wrong. Some guys like them dirty. I guess there are some bikes that I own that are dirty, and I do like them that way, so I guess I could go either way. Now with the engine out, it's time to get the jack out of place and get everything ready to disassemble on this front end. I may keep the jack in place. I don't want the frame to move a whole lot, and maybe it's supported well enough, but I know I need to take these straps off the front of it. So I think I'll start with taking the straps off and see how stable this frame is and then make a decision. I know I want to pull these bars, I need to pull this nacelle, and then of course I want to pull the front end apart. I need to get the wheel and the fender guard and all that stuff apart today. So that's my goal next, is to start working on these parts here. With the straps removed and the jack replaced and secured, I feel this is a little more stable than it was. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start removing these top clamps so I can pull the bars. And then with the bars removed, I should be able to pull this nacelle. And then from there, I should be able to Not sure if I'm taking the front fender off, or the front wheel off first, or the fender, or taking the front end apart next. Decisions to be made, right? Anyway, let's get these bars taken off. On these FLT models, they've got a little bit different of a top clamp. On the other models, it's a one piece. As far as I know, on most of them, except for maybe Panhead, I know some of the early Panheads had a two piece, I think, pretty sure. And on these models, they went to this two-piece strap style top clamp. These also have the nuts in the bottom of the lower clamp, and they will come out. So I like to try to hold them in place so I don't lose them. Push them out. I like to try to keep these pieces of hardware together because when I do sell the triple trees and the, not the triple trees, but the handlebars and the top clamps, I like to sell them all as one piece. That takes the bars off. Get those out of the way. With the bars out of the way, I'm going to put the hardware back in place for these clamps, just for now. That way I'm not losing this stuff. Now with that, I should be able to pull this nacelle, I believe. I got to unhook this switch real quick. We'll pull all the spades off. With that out of the way, I should be able to reassemble these handlebar clamps. With the nacelle out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to undo all the wiring for the ignition switch. That way the wiring for the ignition switch actually goes with the ignition when I pull that. So I'm going to go ahead and get these parts all undone, and once those are undone, then the nacelle will be free, and it should be on to figuring out what the next step is on this front end, whether I'm going to pull the top tree and then pull the front wheel off. I'm not sure. The project really starts to fight you is in the absolute end times. This thing doesn't want to come apart all the way, and I understand it. It's been together for a long time, and you know, I'm making all these changes now, and this thing isn't super happy about it. And with that undone, the nacelle is off. One of the things I do want to do is remove this lock switch. I don't remember how to do it. I know there's a particular way you do it, and I'm pretty sure it involves the key, which I do have. But I want to go ahead and figure out how to get that apart because I know that works and I'd like to sell it separately from the nacelle. The nacelle does have some damage to it, unfortunately, and I feel it could be two different buyers, so I want to get that apart. I'm thinking it's time to remove this goofy headlight. This thing's been on there for I don't know how long. It's an aftermarket job. A lot of guys like them for choppers, and I feel it would look way better on a chopper than it does on this bike. But it's time to unbolt this thing and then get the wiring undone and take care of that abomination. Definitely one of the finest wiring jobs I've ever run into. Just kidding. This was just taped together. I'm actually surprised this thing worked. There was no solder, no connectors, literally just tape holding this thing together, and a zip tie. So there was a zip tie. Crazy to see that this thing worked being installed like that. Amazing. Just the neat things you run into. At this point in our adventure, I'm going to take the front fender off. I think that's the best route for me to go at this point in time, is I want to get that front fender off. I'm going to try to keep the front end on this thing while I take the fender off. And once that's off, then I think I'm going to loosen everything on the bottom so the wheel's ready to remove, and then take the front end apart. That way I'm not pulling the front end off and then having to figure out how to get the fender off. I've done that in the past. That never works out really well for me. It always drives me kind of nuts. So I'm going to go ahead and get in here with my wrench and get this front fender removed. Hopefully this front fender isn't going to fight me too bad. I'm not sure what I'm going to run into here. Hopefully I don't break off any of these bolts in here. I've run into that in the past and it's never a good time. So we're going to start slow and try to get this thing removed properly. Sometimes what you need is a good articulating socket and a terrible angle to get to these things. I'm not sure if there's a better way to do this. There probably is. I'm sure I'm doing it wrong, but I've got them out. Of course, they were super dry. They were not wanting to come out at all. And that makes sense. With the back two removed, the front two should be easier now. Stick with the articulating socket here and a terrible angle. I think we'll have this thing licked. Getting the bumper out of the way creates a little less pressure on everything, so I've removed that to be able to remove the fender. I'm going to go ahead and put the hardware back on this bumper so it stays together. I know this bumper is missing its rubber insert, but it's still in really good shape, honestly. It's got a little bit of wear on it, tons and tons of sand. I'm not sure if this thing went off-roading before it was put away or what, but the front end is covered in sand. Now I should be able to easily remove this rear fender. I know that yanking these fenders through the lower legs there is not the right answer. This fender wasn't in the best shape. It's, I believe, an OEM fender. It looks like it is. And it's got all the right markings, so I'm pretty sure this is a correct Harley Davidson fender. It does need paint, it does have some wear on it. Anyway, it's removed. The best part about these old bikes is these axle caps. If you've never messed with these things, I'm happy for you, that's for sure. These things are always a nightmare, and I really hope this isn't going to be where my day ends. We're going to find out real soon though. These ones actually have a regular flat, a standard screwdriver end on them, so maybe they'll come out. I do happen to have a standard screwdriver here, so let's see if we can fit it in the slot. Maybe. Top one's chewed up real bad, bottom one isn't a whole lot better. because I know better and I know that I'm working with parts that are going to potentially break, I'm going to put my safety glasses on. I do have, I think, the correct socket to get in here. Maybe I can get a little leverage on this thing and turn it. I don't know. Thankfully this side came off. I'm grateful for that. I think I'm going to spray this top one with a little bit of lubricant and see if I can get that one to move. This bottom one, I don't think I'm ever going to get enough leverage to be able to get that off. If I can't get it off, at least I can remove the nut from this side and I still can take the axle out. So I guess it's not a total loss. I was hoping not to have these things on here because I don't like them. I don't like selling them. I don't like putting them back. But if I have to, I guess I'm stuck, right? That screw is completely chewed up on top. The bottom one isn't in a whole lot better shape from what I can feel. But anyway, I've sprayed it with lubricant, so we're going to go ahead and loosen up these axle caps here. These leg caps, I guess. With those loose, we'll go ahead and we'll loosen this axle here, so that way everything on the front end of this bike is ready to come apart. As you can see, I've stripped a bunch more off the bike. Unfortunately, the camera battery died, and I didn't want to bore you guys with those details anyway. I've moved all of the wiring up to this point here. I've taken the coil off, and all the extra pieces that, you know, those things are easily removed, things that people don't necessarily want to watch. But we're at the point of taking this front end off. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to knock these little ears down that hold this nut in place. And once those are knocked down, we're going to go ahead and undo this stem. Surprisingly, that was very loose. And now it's tightening up. Odd. Anyway, we'll grab the power tool. That was my initial thought anyway. With the top nut removed, we can remove the rest of the wiring here. It looks like there's one screw holding everything in place right there. So we'll go ahead and get that screw out, then the wiring will be free from this bike. Now with the top nut off and the wiring out of the way, we're going to go ahead and take these two top bolts off so we can take the top tree off, and then this front end will be ready for removal. Now with these two caps removed, we'll go ahead and knock this out of the way, and we should be able to remove this front end. Now with the top tree removed, we're one step closer to getting this done. I do have a retaining nut on top of the steering stem here, and I know there's a tool that's specific for taking that off. Unfortunately, I do not have it. What I do have that works in a pinch is an old pair of channel locks, and you can actually grab onto this, of course in the right setting, and start to turn this thing loose. That wasn't as tight as I expected it to be. Some of these I've taken apart and they're super tight. This one seems to be threading off really nicely. With these fine threads, it really takes forever. Now we can remove the dust cap. The dust cap out of the way, we'll just check the bearing, make sure that's loose in there. Seems to be a little tight, but I think that'll come out real easy. We'll put these out of the way. And then we're actually going to reinstall these caps, just so I don't lose any fluid on the floor and make an even bigger mess. Just thread those back in so they sit. There is a rubber grommet that goes in there that's actually in the top tree, and I'll have to fish those out eventually. But this should stop it from leaking a whole lot. At this point, we can remove the wiring, get that right out of the way. It's crazy. That's one complete wiring system minus rear fender. Since I know I'll be removing these legs from these trees, I want to go ahead and I want to loosen up these pinch bolts here. So these are a 5/8 bolt, and I'm going to go ahead and loosen those now. Obviously this front end is ready to come off the bike, just a little bit of a tip and this thing's ready to go. I still want to loosen these while they're on and in place. Now with all my tools out of the way and everything, I'm going to just lift the frame up, and then we'll guide the front end down, and the frame of course will slide back a little bit, and then this thing is pretty much all the way apart. Should balance there now. Now I'm left with just the front end here. So the front end, I'm going to pull the wheel from it. And then of course, like I said, I want to pull these legs off from these triple trees, because the legs I want to sell separate from the trees. I don't want to sell them together. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the wheel off first, and then we'll go ahead and we'll disassemble these trees. Actually, why fight the process, right? This front end's coming apart real easy. The set of triple trees have slid all the way down, so that means they're ready to be removed. So with that, I'm going to pull these caps again. Hopefully these rubbers won't give me a huge fit. Sometimes these things get stuck too. They're sliding off real nice. One. There's two. And then we'll slide these trees, this bottom tree off. There's a little bit of dirt on there yet, so that's going to fight me a little bit. I'm going to set that there for a second. I'm going to grab a little bit of lubricant. I'm going to lube the top of these legs here, these fork tubes. That way I can get everything to slide off nicely. now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to slide the trees down. Move that lubricant around a little bit. I'm going to take a rag and clean up the top part of these trees. Unfortunately, there's some grime on there, and that's going to hold me up. With that out of the way, hopefully, we'll be able to slide these trees right off now. With that lower tree out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall these caps. That way again, so I'm not losing fluid everywhere. Now we're going to actually slide the legs down so they're just resting on the bench. I guess while the frame's in, we'll rest one on the frame. And now we'll go ahead and remove that axle. There's one leg removed. And with the axle out of the way, the second leg is removed. It's nice to be able to brace the wheel and the tire vise on the front and keep everything from going too far. That definitely aided me in taking this front end apart. It's been a real busy couple of days around here. I've worked on this bike now for, I don't know, 4 days, I think, tearing it apart. I know I can do it faster than that, but you know, some days it doesn't make sense to speed through this type of stuff. You know, I wanted to get it apart nicely. I wanted to take my time with it, and I wanted to, of course, show you guys that process. I've got quite the cleanup ahead of me, and I'm ready to get this shop back to being reorganized. All these parts are going to be cataloged, they'll be cleaned a little bit, and they'll be ready for sale. So if you're looking for FLT parts, check out my eBay page, Rocky's Chop Shop, of course on eBay. That's mostly where I sell. I do some stuff on Facebook Marketplace, not much. If you're local to the Muskegon area and you're looking for parts, definitely hit me up. Well guys, I appreciate you sticking around through the end of this series. I know that these videos weren't the best videos I've ever made. Unfortunately, with all the camera issues that I've had, batteries dying, I can see this battery is already at half, and I've only been videoing for 16 minutes. I know a lot of that's going to get cut out, but still, it's amazing how poor these things are, how poor quality they are. So maybe I just need a new camera. Maybe I need to buy new batteries again. I don't know. But as always, I appreciate you guys sticking around. I appreciate the kind words. I'm grateful for the feedback that you guys give me. It's been really cool to converse with people around the world. You know, lately I've gotten a lot more comments, probably because I've got a lot more followers, and it's been a lot of fun actually talking back and forth with you guys. So I really appreciate that. If you did like the video, please give it a like, give it a thumbs up. You know, that helps my analytics. You know, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet and you like this type of content, hit that subscribe button. I know it's not all the same stuff. It's not all tearing bikes apart. I got one on the other side of the shop that's going together. And I'm going to start back on that pretty soon because I've got a bunch of the parts in for it. But I needed some room in the shop and I needed to move on this project and I needed to, you know, of course, recoup my funds that I've got out on that bike. As always, guys, I appreciate you. We'll catch you next time.